The Trump collusion investigation comes to an end. Canada's federal government launches a controversial gun control survey, and McDonald's deploys a interesting hiring method. I'm Marco Perri. Welcome to the Perri platform. Today we've got a lot to talk about, and it seems like we kind of have a theme to this episode. We're going to talk about Trump, guns, and McDonald's. If that doesn't spell out America, I don't know what else does. Maybe we have to add in an eagle, but we might as well call ourselves Canamerica today. Our first order of business today is going to be tackling the Mueller Report. This was completed by Special Agent Mueller, and essentially his job was to investigate the allegations of collusion between Trump and Russia. That encompasses a wide array of things, ranging from his campaign to his presidency to the whole voting procedure. Anything and anywhere where a connection could be found between Trump and Russia was looked into. And as you can see from the time, it took 2 years to compile the report, so it was comprehensive. Finally, the results came out yesterday, and a lot of people were very excited to see what exactly was going to be revealed. I feel like I need a drum roll for this announcement, so da-na-na-na. Without further ado, the results of the Mueller Report. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, there was no evidence to point towards collusion between Trump and Russia, and that was actually pretty surprising to a lot of people. There was a bunch of interest parties who were set on the report exposing Trump, and it comes out and it basically says the opposite. So that was extremely anticlimactic for a lot of people. And one thing we have to note, this report is only a summary, because in the report it details a lot of parties within the White House even who gave testimony, gave their opinion, gave evidence, and you can't be exposing that to the general public or even to people outside the immediate accordance of the report, because by doing that, people who gave testimony are essentially going to be snaked out, and we have to preserve, the details to make sure people are still comfortable with testifying in the future. But we were able to get the gist of it, and the gist of it is, as I said, there was no linkage found between Trump colluding with Russia. So this report was completed by Mueller over the span of 2 years, taking into consideration a lot of variables, a lot of factors, and heavy resource allocation. No linkage found whatsoever. So obviously this is a positive report finding. You didn't want there to be collusion between Trump and Russia, because that would indicate a major flaw within America that's being able to become a puppet to Russia. So honestly, it's a great finding for, honestly, it should be everyone. You could have feelings towards Trump, but at the end of the day, America is what should come first to the American people. You don't want the report to say that your president is going to be indicted on collusion charges. So people should be happy about this, but it turns out there's a lot of people who aren't, and we're going to get into that a little bit more later. But first, I kind of want to talk about something funny. So Trump's reaction to all of this is just priceless, honestly. If you hop onto his Twitter, a lot of you are familiar with his antics, and they continue today. He must have been super happy because the caps came out, and the tweets are just, honestly, very entertaining. So basically, the first thing he does, he starts quoting the report, saying he's not guilty, and he's just hyping it up a lot. And he goes on to say, like, "Make America great again," all caps. "Good morning. Have a great day." And probably my favorite thing about the entire situation is that he starts retweeting his own tweets. So the tweets were posted, and then a couple hours later, he starts retweeting them again. And it's really very America, America, USA, USA type thing. Like he won the Super Bowl or something. But I kind of see where he's coming from, though, if you think about it. For the past 2 years, there's been nonstop criticism, nonstop accusations, nonstop media parties going after him, trying to basically convict him of collusion. But now there's a document that's been released that's actually based on fact, and it's saying the opposite, saying that there is no linkage between that. So it's probably a happy day for him, and you can kind of tell from the tweets. They're just really too funny. I don't know why he types in all caps all the time, but maybe he should have taken that social media marketing class 101 or something. But aside from that finding that the collusion was not really something that people should continue to pursue, Mueller did note that he was unsure if whether or not Trump can still be convicted for obstruction of justice. And what he's referring to is some of the controversial actions he's taken throughout his presidency, really. So the main thing I guess you could say is the firing of the previous FBI director, and potentially you could say obstruction of justice because of his seemingly unwillingness to cooperate with the report early on. But he even notes, though, Mueller, within the report, that these charges are fringe, and he's not even sure if they can be applied. He's just kind of giving the suggestion out there. I'm not too sure what really he's trying to accomplish with that. Trying to get someone else to pick up the battle is what it seems like to me. I kind of want to shift our attention now to the people who are extremely upset about the results. And first of all, I don't feel like this is something you should be upset about. It's positive news. We take it face value. It's a really great thing that there was no collusion that could be established or even found throughout the whole entire 2-year report process. But there's even people now who you can see on social media, even within the House representatives, who are freaking out and saying that they don't even accept the results. And to me, that's kind of ludicrous. And it just points to the whole notion of confirmation bias that I've talked about, and such a dangerous thing. So you refuse to believe anything that doesn't confirm your prior notions of a certain subject matter. And it's one thing to look at the report and point out an inconsistency. Let's say you find something that you think was handled inappropriately, or you think there's like a flaw with the report, or even if you think the report was biased. Like, those are all very valid claims to make. And I do hope that you share your opinion if you think these things, but it's another thing to just vaguely say, I don't believe in the report. I don't accept these results. He is guilty of committing these crimes. It's like, come on. These guys spent 2 years compiling this report. The least you can do if you're going to make claims like that is point out why you think that. If you just think that for no reason and you just refuse to take anyone's word for it, it's really counterproductive, and I would actually call that unintelligent, because it just points to the whole confirmation bias thing. Like, what do you want? Do you want them to fabricate the results and say that there was collusion when there wasn't, just to appease you? And honestly, as a neutral party, you should be able to recognize that the goalposts are moving. Like, I consider myself a neutral party, and it's very clear to me that, first of all, the initial intent of the report was to try and establish some linkage between collusion between Russia and Trump. But now that that was disproved, they're moving on to other things, such as obstruction of justice. And to me, if that was such a concern from the start, it should have been handled in the report as well. It seems like such a fallback now that you're just trying to look for something to pin on him. If there actually was some type of obstruction of justice that can be proved, then let it happen. I think he should be held accountable to those claims. But even within the report that Mueller filed, he's saying it's only a notion that this is possible, maybe. Like what's that really mean? Like, it could be a thing. This was your job to try and find the flaws in Mr. Trump. And it's directly related to the report itself. He's talking about obstruction of justice with the report. It's very connected. It should have been in the report. And what he's saying is that within his report, you couldn't find evidence, but maybe someone else can. So I don't know. To me, it seems like everyone is trying to find something to pin on him to get him impeached. And you can even look within the Democratic Party to look for some type of sensible response to this, such as Nancy Pelosi's. She's the Speaker of the House. She's already said that she's stopping the pursuit of impeachment for Trump because the evidence is not really there, honestly. Like, you can have problems with him, that's fine. Just be able to articulate your points. But the whole impeachment notion seems to be slipping away day after day. Like, all the ammunition is starting to be dispersed. And it's really coming down to this. If you want to get rid of Trump, you have to vote. The Americans have to go out and vote. Impeachment's not going to happen unless he does something extremely radical again within the next couple of months, because the election's coming up next year. So the time frame is limited. You might get rid of him through voting, but it seems like impeachment might not be the route anymore. Like, this was the thing you needed. This was the holy grail to impeachment. If there was a link between collusion, then that would happen immediately, basically. But it's not there, so they have to move on. So there's two things I really wanted to highlight via this story. The first one was to give you guys an understanding of the current political climate over in America, our neighboring country. And the second was to highlight the importance of rationality when it comes to matters like this. So first of all, let's get this straight. If the report came out and pointed towards him being guilty of collusion, I think he should be held accountable to the law. Get him impeached, throw him in jail. That's completely unacceptable for an American president to be doing. Collusion with Russia is far beneath them, and it's disgusting if that were to be the case. But the report's saying the opposite. On the contrary, he did not collude with them. And for people who are out here trying to say they reject these results without any logical basis, it's just not something that has to happen in politics. Like, you have to be logical, because if you refuse to take logic into consideration, all you get into is a back and forth argument that really can't be solved. If, like, the report happened, a 2-year report, what else will it take to convince you? Honestly, like, you have to be able to give and take in politics, the right and the wrong. There has to be a balance. It can't just be completely one-sided, and that's how you become a radicalist, honestly. So very important that you remain level-headed and handle these discussions maturely. So that's enough of Trump for today. Given his track record, I'm sure he'll be popping his head up again for us to talk about in the future. But we're going to move on to another very American topic, this time within the context of Canada, and that is guns. So the federal government recently launched a gun control survey where they got over 134,000 respondents. But here's the funny part. A lot of people were taken aback by the results because they seem not to make sense within the context of Canada. So the first thing, 76% of people said no, more should not be done to limit access to assault weapons. The next thing that kind of stuck out to people was 75% of respondents said that the Canadian government should not focus on legal firearms. Instead, all the focus should be towards illegal weapons. And people were kind of shocked. They're like, what kind of results are these? Like, definitely not what we expected. Then a Mr. Quebec engineer comes out and he states that he was able to submit 25 to 35,000 respondents by himself. He did this by using a robot. I believe he programmed it himself. And that was because he was an avid gun rights enthusiast. And he felt like the results of the survey would have been skewed if it wasn't for him interfering. And that itself was kind of funny because he effectively skewed the results in an attempt to not have them skewed. So it doesn't really make sense. But he was trying to prove a point. And I think it was a pretty interesting point that he was proving. So let's dig a little bit deeper into his grievances and figure out why exactly he felt the need to submit these 30,000 responses on his own accord. First of all, he raised a point about the questions in the survey being heavily biased and leading people towards certain responses. And I think he had a point. Looking at the survey, there are some extremely vague questions that were going on. So the first one, should more be done to limit access to handguns? Okay, on its face value, it seems like a very rational question. Should more be done to limit access? I think a lot of people would say yes. I would say yes. More should be done to limit it. The ambiguity comes into effect now, though. What exactly does that mean? And this is where he took offense. What does that really mean that more should be done? Does that mean a registry? Does that mean a ban? Does that mean heightened screening? So using a question like this that's so vague actually gives the government more power than you realize at first. And I'll use a hypothetical situation to kind of illustrate that. So let's say the government gives you a survey asking something like, I don't know, would you like to reduce the amount of times raccoons break into your garbage? Obviously, everyone's going to say yes to that because, it's a very common sentiment. We don't like it when people have to deal with raccoons making a mess on their front lawn and everything like that. So, okay, we'll say yes. Next thing you know, the government comes along and kills all the raccoons. Now what? Hey, that's a little bit extreme. We didn't want that. But look at this. The government said, 90% of you said you wanted the problem dealt with, so we dealt with it in the way we found most appropriate. So what you're doing by answering a very vague question like that is you're handing them the power of interpretation. And I'm not saying the Canadian government is irresponsible, but if they were to be irresponsible, you can see how that would be an extremely slippery slope. And not just for gun control. I'm talking in general, because by doing things like this, you set precedents. Everything's about the precedent. So we say yes to a vague question. The government interprets it however they want. And as you can see with the handgun situation, that itself is very interpretable as well. Like, what do you mean more should be done to limit access? A registry, a ban, heightened screening. Even within those three options, the degree to which people agree with each of them would be varying extremely. Like an updated registry. Okay, that's very practical. A lot of people would say yes. How about a ban on all guns? That's more controversial now. People have interests. People like to go hunting. People want self-defense in their house. That one's going to be very polarizing. How about a heightened screening process? Okay, I think a lot of people would accept that one as well. So, as you can see, a wide array of sentiments over a very vague question. To me, it comes down to government being irresponsible when they administer these surveys. Like, these are things they should be able to identify themselves. They're the leaders of our country. I think they should be more specific. As I've said, the three options. Why don't you list those out and get people to individually reply to each one so you can understand how they would feel towards each course of action? By making it very vague, it's almost as if they just want an excuse to do something, because it's very possible, I think, thinking about situations that could happen. 80% of people say they think more should be done. They'll take any action they deem to be effective and back it up through this claim, even though that itself is a fallacy, because their individual action is only being drawn from a very vague question. It's not as if they asked directly about the measure that they're planning on implementing. So, very slippery slope. The government should not be doing this. And honestly, I'm not too sure who they're hiring as their survey consultants. Like, as you've seen from my previous episode, the Ontario Voices on Student Sexual Violence Survey, it was extremely poorly done. The results were given in very vague terms where people didn't know what action to take. And we're kind of seeing that again here, honestly. So something has to be done about this, because whether or not you agree with the whole gun control debate, it's the sentiment that really matters. And don't let the topic draw you away from that, because at its crux, it's actually a very, very serious thing that's going on here. They need to be more upfront on what they're saying. The goal should be establishing the truth. We should want an accurate sample of what Canadian citizens think. So be as explicit as you can. Get the truth. Don't try to play around with these vague questions and make assumptions. It's not that difficult. Let's find out what we really think, and we'll go from there. And we also should be limiting people like this individual who was able to submit 30,000 votes on the system. It shouldn't be happening like that. And it kind of speaks to the lack of security that the government has with these surveys. If this guy did it, now I'm wondering on prior surveys, were other people able to influence the results like that too? So he pointed out 2 issues, even though he kind of messed up the survey in the process. The first one, upgrade security. What he did should not be possible. The next thing, be more direct with your questions and your reporting structure. There's no room for assumptions with the government, because, as I said, the Canadian government, we're lucky, is very responsible, but if that were to change one day, it would be an extremely dangerous situation to be in. So moving on to our final topic now, McDonald's. Very American as well. As you see, we kept pace with the theme of today's episode. So McDonald's is doing something really cool. You could say they're revolutionizing the hiring process. What really happened with this story is McDonald's had a collaboration with Snapchat to take in these things called Snapplications. And basically what that did was move the entire hiring process off of McDonald's website onto Snapchat. And how this worked was people who wanted a job at McDonald's would use a certain filter. It was a McDonald's hiring filter. They geotagged it to the location that they needed people to apply within. And within that snap, you would film a 30-second video of yourself answering a question. I believe the question was, what makes you an excellent fit at McDonald's? And as soon as you're done, it would send, and the HR department would have it. It really was meant to simplify the hiring process and encourage young people to apply to McDonald's to get that first job experience. McDonald's was the first company to do something like this in Canada, and my first reaction to it was, that sounds pretty cool. Honestly, they've basically taken the traditional online video interview and simplified it to an extreme. Just a 30-second snap that you send to them, and they'll hire you based off your answer to the question you're given. To me, it makes sense given the context of McDonald's, because it's a job that doesn't really need the highest qualifications to get in. And a 30-second video of you giving an answer as to why you fit in kind of makes sense. I can see why that should be enough, especially given the context that a lot of applicants are going to be young people, high school students without a lot of experience anyways to talk about. It really simplified the process and made use of a platform that's very popular among young people. One possible downside that came up in my mind was the value of actually going to an interview is now being removed. I remember doing my first interview when I was in high school for a retail job, and I was so nervous, but it was good to get that out of my system, to go through an interview. And it happened repeatedly. I went through a couple of jobs during high school, and by the time I was in university, I was more comfortable and ready for situations where I really had to present my ideas in interviews for more functional roles. By removing that aspect, kind of like a mock interview you could call it, with McDonald's, I'm not too sure how that's going to impact the teenagers of today's day and age, especially if a lot of companies follow suit. If every company is doing Snapplications now, 30-second videos, I'm not too sure that translates well into real-world applications, because a 30-second interview basically means you failed in the real world, unless you already know the recruiter. If you have to answer real questions face-to-face with someone, there's a lot of social cues that go into play with that, and they're not going to be developing that now. So I see the benefits to it and the possible downsides. We'll just see how it plays out. There is one more thing McDonald's announced as well in partnership with this new technological thing they're doing with the Snapplications, and that is a future partnership they're going to be having with Google Voice for an automated voice ordering service. Hey Siri, give me a Big Mac. Imagine just saying that. Oh, my Siri actually just turned on, and that's pretty funny. I think it's like linking me to Uber Eats right now. I shouldn't even continue with it. I'm gonna close that. That was not expected, but that was pretty funny. So the thing with that strikes out to me is that McDonald's is really enabling us to reach our full potential of laziness. So first of all, McDonald's and Uber Eats, you don't even have to leave your house anymore to get McDonald's. food that's already terrible for you. So they removed the movement aspect of it. Now you don't even need to pick up your phone. You don't even have to move your body at all. Just sit down, talk to Siri, and she'll order it for you. Yeah, sounds like a dangerous combination. Laziness and junk food is not good. Except for once in a while when you're going to treat yourself. Then I can see the application of that. You kind of feel like you're a king, ordering someone around to get food for you, like Siri. Give me that Big Mac. I didn't say hey this time because I don't want it to trigger again. But overall, pretty interesting. McDonald's trying to implement that technological edge to them. And you can already imagine that other fast food giants are going to follow suit. It seems like McDonald's is always the leader with these technological changes and stuff like that. I'm surprised I haven't seen those mobile ordering kiosks at like Burger King or Wendy's yet. But, we'll see. I think it's a pretty cool idea. It's going to enable us to be super lazy going forward. But, it's McDonald's. So that's it for today's episode. Thanks for joining me on the Perri platform. I'll see you soon.